This video will show you how to replace your front steering knuckle on this Toyota Corolla. This is part of your front steering and suspension located behind your front wheel. Let's get into it. Okay friend, let's get started on our job. The first thing we need to do is safely raise and support the front of the vehicle so the wheel's off the ground. Once we've completed that, to remove the right front wheel, we're going to remove all 5 of our 21mm lug nuts. Now that we have the wheel off, we have a clear view of our brakes. We're going to have to remove the steering knuckle, so we have to remove the brakes. To easily remove these, let's start by removing the outer tie rod end from the backside of the knuckle. Now along the backside here, we can see where the outer tie rod end connects to our steering knuckle. Typically you're going to have a locking cotter pin holding the mounting nut in place. You can use some cutters to remove that. If that did happen to break, you're going to want to fully remove it from that tie rod stud before the installation. I'm just going to try to work this out of place. We'll be using a 17mm for our mounting nut. There we are. We'll just give that a quick inspection. Start it back on a couple threads. Now we can start separating the outer tie rod end from our steering knuckle. If you have a tie rod removal tool, you can use that. Otherwise, we'll use a hammer, cause some vibration. I have my nut on top of my stud here. I'll tap on this. Separate the outer tie rod end, give it a close inspection, make sure it's still in usable order. Now we can move along the front of the steering knuckle so we can start removing our caliper. Now along this side, we're going to start removing the caliper bracket bolts. The caliper bracket bolts are 17mm headed bolts, so we can start removing the upper bolt. We'll start it back in a couple threads. Now we'll hold onto the caliper, fully remove that bolt that we had loosened, lift the caliper up and out of position. Once you have it up, the next thing I always do is pay attention to my pads. I want to make sure they don't look like they're worn at an angle or damaged. We'll set that aside, putting no pressure on our flex hose. Once that's out of place, you can remove your brake rotor. We'll remove our 30mm 12-point axle nut. Using a hammer and punch, we're going to break the axle free from the wheel bearing hub. Back over where we had removed the outer tie rod end, along the back side of the knuckle, we're going to start dislodging our ABS wheel speed sensor. We only need to remove this from the knuckle. For this, use a 10mm to remove the mounting bolt. Remove the sensor. We'll just give this a quick inspection, make sure it is still reusable, not damaged in any way. We'll set that aside. In this same area, we're looking at where the bottom of the front strut connects to our steering knuckle. We're going to remove the hardware. For this, there's going to be 22mm bolts coming through from the front towards the rear, and along the back side here, you can see that there's 22mm mounting nuts. I'll use a wrench for holding the bolt head and start removing these nuts. We can remove that mounting nut. We'll give it a quick inspection. I'm going to leave this bolt in here for now. Let's fully remove the next mounting bolt and mounting nut. We're going to pause up along the top and make our way down along the bottom of the lower control arm for our next mounting hardware. Under this area, there's a 17mm mounting bolt and 2 17mm mounting nuts. Let's start by removing the bolt. Now we should be able to pull down on that control arm. You can use a pry bar if necessary, and we're going to separate the ball joint. Now we can move this around. Make sure that the axle can push out and away from the steering hub. We'll remove that bolt. Now we're over on the bench. We're looking along the backside of our steering knuckle. What we're looking for is a snap ring. On this particular one, you can see it making its way all the way around this area. Go ahead and use some penetrant. It's common for these to be stuck in place. We're just going to try to work out any rust that's in this area so we can gain access to each of our two ears. We're going to want to have some snap ring pliers so we can grab onto those areas. Once you have hold of them, go ahead and squeeze them together and we'll pull this up and out of place. You can use an angled pick if necessary. Just be extremely careful. This will be under spring pressure. Try to get under it here. There we are. We'll just give that a thorough inspection and set it aside. We have our steering knuckle over at the press. We're going to start pressing out the bearing hub. That's going to come through from the backside, out through what would be the outboard side. Now for this, I'm going to be using a 27mm impact socket, so I can press only against that hub, which is the inner circle. Use an adapter if necessary. We're holding the knuckle in several areas that's holding it up, so we can press that hub down and away. Let's start applying pressure. Make sure everything's as even as possible as we continue on. This is coming out fairly well. We can lift that up. There's our hub and our outboard bearing race. Now we'll continue on pressing out the rest of the bearing. You can tell that I've turned over the steering knuckle. I'm supporting from underneath, but leaving a gap under here so the bearing can make its way out. Now I want to start removing the inner race. For this, I'm using a 36mm impact socket. I have it backwards, so now let's lightly apply pressure. Once that race is out of place, we're going to take it inverted, slide it right up along the top here. I'll just continue on with my 36mm socket. Okay. Now we can tell that that bearing did break free. We can continue driving it out of here. You can use a press. You can also tap on it with a hammer, assuming it's loose enough. Almost out. Continuing on, we're looking inside of the knuckle. We can see that the bearing's removed, but we still have the outer casing. You can feel a ridge. We want to find an adapter that's going to fit directly on that casing. I'm using an impact socket as a spacer. Now we'll start applying pressure, forcing this out and through the inboard side. Perfect. We're looking along the outboard side of the steering knuckle. We can start dislodging the backing plate from our steering knuckle. You're going to find that there's 3 10mm headed mounting bolts. Let's start removing each of these. It's very common for these to be rusted in place. Let's continue on. Now we should be able to take hold of that backing plate and give it a wiggle. We're attempting to break it free. Typically, the backing plate is pressed onto the knuckle, so you may have to tap it out of place. If you are going to do that, do it from the backside. We have this turned over. We're going to start tapping it out of place. I have a small hammer, and I'm going to use this pry bar, start tapping on that backing plate along where the knuckle is. Now we can start removing our lower ball joint from our steering knuckle. We'll have to remove the mounting nut, remove the locking cotter pin first. See if we can get this cotter pin out of here. Just work it out of position using some cutters. See if we can get this cotter pin out of here. Just work it out of position using some cutters. We can start removing our 19mm mounting nut. I'm using a swivel socket for this. Now that I have that loose, I'm going to keep it on there a couple threads. I'll apply some penetrant, and we're going to cause some vibration, driving the ball joint out of place. You don't want to try using a pickle fork. That can damage the ball joint. A thorough inspection of your lower ball joint to confirm it's not damaged in any way. This looks fine. We'll set it aside. There it is, friend. Okay, friend, let's prepare to install our brand new front steering knuckle. We're going to get this in the vise so we can hold it in place and continue on with our lower ball joint installation. As far as the ball joint, I made sure that I fully removed that cotter pin. Slide the stud straight up and through. It's a good idea to make sure that you have the cotter pin port in an area that you can slide the cotter pin through. If you have it so it's facing straight towards the knuckle, you're going to find you have an issue. As for that mounting nut, start it on, snug it up. The torque for that will be 76 foot-pounds. We've got our mounting nut snug. Let's torque it to that 76 foot-pounds. Now, once you have it torqued, we need to pay attention to the slots on the mounting nut in comparison to the port on the ball joint stud. They need to be aligned so we can install a locking cotter pin. If it's not, you can continue tightening this mounting nut just enough that the very next slot does. After that, install your locking cotter pin. I have that aligned. Let's get that cotter pin in place. Just slide it straight on through, pin it over. Make sure this nut cannot loosen up on us while we're driving down the road. Now we can start installing our backing plate onto the steering knuckle. The first thing I like to do is apply some anti-seize to each one of my mounting ports. Now let's install our backing plate. We'll make sure we have this in the proper orientation. We want to make sure each one of our mounting bolt ports align, but you also want to make sure that the notched area of the backing plate allows for the caliper to be installed. You can see exactly where that needs to be. Start in all three of the mounting bolts before tightening any of them. They're all started in. Let's snug them up. Double check to ensure your backing plate's properly installed to your steering knuckle. Now it's time to install our brand new wheel bearing. When we go to install this, it's important to note you never want to press on any areas of the bearing in exception of the outer portion, the casing. For that, if you just take the original casing from your original bearing, it should line up directly along that. Now with that said, let's take that brand new bearing. We're going to align it with our steering knuckle. We'll get that as flush as possible. We're going to start pressing this down into the steering knuckle, so I'm using the original casing as I mentioned. Use any spacers you deem necessary, and we'll continue on pressing this down as far as possible until it's completely bottomed out. Slow and steady wins the race. Okay, so right there, I heard an audible difference as I was pressing it down, and I also can feel some pressure. That doesn't mean we're completely bottomed out, so we need to give this a thorough inspection. For that, let's go ahead and disassemble this from the press so we can have a close look. Now that I have that original casing out of the way, we can look and we want to pay attention for the groove where our snap ring's going to go. Once you confirm that you can see that groove, that's a good sign, but we're not stopping there. Let's go ahead and flip this hub so we can have a close look at the opposite side. Now in this area, we're paying attention to where the bearing's supposed to hit up against our steering knuckle. Along that ridge, double check to make sure there's no gap. Assuming it looks good, we'll continue on. Now we've got our snap ring in our snap ring pliers. We're going to start squeezing this. Keep in mind it's going to be under spring pressure. Be extremely careful as we bring this down into position. We're being careful and aware for any pinch points here. We don't want to get hurt in any way. Now we're looking in this area. We want to make sure it's completely seated all the way around. If you are going to tap on this, you want to be extremely careful not to cause any damage to your bearing. Just a couple light taps, making your way around, confirming it's properly secured. We want to have an area set up that we can rest the center portion of our hub down on, where we're not going to cause any damage to any of our lug studs. Continuing on, we have our bearing with our knuckle. We'll rest the bearing directly over the top of the hub. Now, as you go to press this down, there's a couple things that we want to pay attention to. First of all, when we start pressing this down, we're only pressing along the center circle here. We don't want to press anywhere along the center of the bearing. That will cause damage, and you're going to have to re-replace it. Just use your original wheel bearing race. We can use a spacer as needed. And now we'll continually apply pressure downward. While we're doing this, we want to make sure that the wheel bearing does spin along the way. If it seems like it's binding, more than likely you're not going down straight. The race has to be perfectly aligned, and of course, whatever spacer you're using needs to fit down inside this circular port as well. All right, we're applying light pressure and we're watching the knuckle go down, and as I mentioned, just a slight spin here. While we're holding pressure, let's just take a peek between the bearing hub and our steering knuckle. We want to make sure we're completely bottomed out. Any gap that you might leave here, if it's not pressed in perfectly, the brakes might hit up against something and it's going to affect your alignment. It can be dangerous. Let's just make sure we're completely seated before continuing on. No binding, perfectly seated, release pressure. Let's get this over to the vehicle. We're over at the vehicle. Before we continue on with any more installation, we're going to clean a couple areas. We'll start with the bottom of the front strut. Use some parts cleaner directly on a rag. We'll give this a quick wipe, confirm it's not rotted and weak. Clearly this one's still in great condition. Moving along, we have our front axle. We'll clean the spline area and along the area where the threading is. We don't want to cause any damage. We can just use some more of that cleaner. We can lift this up. Quick inspection of that control arm. And of course our outer tie rod end. For this, make sure you don't get any type of cleaner inside of your tie rod boot. We have some cleaner on our rag. A little bit of anti-seize on the splined area of the axle. Now it's time to install that front steering knuckle. When we bring this in position, we'll start the bearing over the axle. We'll lift everything up, and then it's time for the lower ball joint studs directly into that lower control arm. With that rested in position, we'll carefully swing this up and start in our 2 upper mounting bolts. Be aware of your ABS wheel speed sensor wire. those bolts come through from the front towards the rear. They're both started in, we're going to snug them up, and the torque for each of these will be 177 foot-pounds. Just one more time, I'm going to mention you want to be extremely careful for your wiring harness. Now we're down along the bottom of the control arm, so we can start in the lower mounting hardware holding the ball joint in place. I typically start with the mounting bolt. Now that we have that in place, let's start on each of our 2 mounting nuts. Snug them up. The torque for these is 66 foot-pounds. We'll snug our mounting bolts first. It's time to pay attention to our ABS wheel speed sensor. We want to give this a close inspection. Just go ahead and wipe it down, make sure it's not cracked, worn, or damaged in any way. We can get this in place into the steering knuckle. Slide that right down in place. With that rested in position, we'll continue on with our 10mm headed mounting bolt. I like to use a tiny bit of anti-seize on this mounting bolt. The torque for this will be 89 inch-pounds. Just double check, make sure that's secured. We'll apply some anti-seize on our wheel bearing hub mating surface here. Just go ahead and spread that around. Now you want to make sure you pay attention along the back side of your front brake rotor. Make sure there's no miscellaneous debris. You can use some sandpaper if necessary. Slide that brake rotor in place. We want to make sure we hold it there so it does not fall off, and we'll continue on with our caliper. For the caliper, we're going to slide it in place and continue on with our 2 mounting bolts. Make our adjustments as necessary. They're started in, snug them up, torque those to 79 foot-pounds. We're on the other side of the steering knuckle. It's time to reinstall the outer tie rod ends. Slide that into position. We'll continue on with our castle nut. For this, snug it up and torque it to 36 foot-pounds. Once you have it torqued, we're paying attention to the slots on the mounting nut in comparison to the port on the tie rod end stud. We need to make sure one of the slots is properly aligned so we can install a locking cotter pin. If your slot is not aligned, continue tightening until the very next slot is. Ours looks like it's aligned, so I'm just going to slide this right in. And of course, we'll pin it over so there's no way this nut can loosen up on us while we're driving down the road. Let's remove our lug nut. Now it's time for our axle nut. Go ahead and start that onto the threaded portion of your axle. When we go to tighten this, we're using our 12.30mm socket, but we're doing it by hand. You don't want to use an impact tool when you install this. You're going to ruin your bearing. We'll just bottom this out, and then we can bring it down closer to the ground to torque it. Once you have that bottomed out, it's time to torque it. Let's make sure we hold this in the proper positioning. I'm just going to use a pry bar directly across these studs down towards the ground diagonally. We're going to be torquing this axle nut to 158 foot-pounds. Once you have that torqued, we want to make sure that this mounting nut will not loosen up on us, so what we need to do is take a hammer and punch. We're paying attention to the end of the axle. You're going to find that there's a slot. Let's use the hammer and punch and drive the nut down into this area, preventing it from loosening. Let's get a little more here. Now we can get the wheel on here. Once you have the wheel in place, start on all 5 of your 21mm lug nuts and we'll bottom them out. We'll get the wheels back on the ground and we can torque these lug nuts to 76 foot-pounds. Now that we have the wheel safely on the ground, let's torque each one of our 21mm lug nuts to 76 foot-pounds. Torqued. Okay friend, we finished our installation. The next thing we want to do is make sure we hop in the passenger compartment and pump up the brake pedal till it's nice and firm. Take the vehicle for a road test down to your local alignment shop. Thanks for watching.
When only the best will do, demand TRQ. The only company that lets you view before you do. TRQ is committed to offering the highest quality aftermarket auto parts that are engineered for peace of mind. Thanks for using and viewing with TRQ.